Okay, welcome back. We're now going to look at some ways to give your instructions so there's more likelihood that your students are actually going to follow them and do what you've asked. I'm just going to go down each of these in turn. First is to, it's quite an obvious one, make sure you've got their attention. This is why we say it's probably better with a really challenging group to divide and conquer and give your instructions to small groups and individuals so that you know that you've got eye contact with them, you know that there's not too much likelihood of them not hearing you. So you've got to have their attention first. If it's a big group, you make sure that you get their attention before you start speaking to them. Second is to use all those elements of clear communication that we've just talked about. Your body language, the paraverbals, using clear, specific, explicit terms, trying to steer away from vague, abstract terms like quietly and respectfully. Next is to check back. Now this is a really good way of making sure that a student has got absolutely no excuse for not doing as you have asked. Okay, if I give the student to Johnny, if I give the instruction to Johnny to get on with your work, Johnny, I want you to get down to question 5 in the next 5 minutes, and I walk away and I'm dealing with other students, and then I come back and Johnny's just sat there and he's done nothing, I can say to Johnny, Johnny, you haven't done the work, and he can use that classic excuse that they use so often, which is, I didn't hear you, or I didn't understand. And what Johnny's done there is he's played an absolute blinder. That's his joker card. He's got out of the last 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes of work by just using that very clever excuse. The reason it's clever is it puts all the responsibility on the teacher. It's your fault that he didn't understand you. It's your fault that he didn't hear you. So you've got to go through it again, and he's very cleverly got out of 20 minutes of work. The way to get round that is to give your instruction to Johnny. Johnny, I'd like you to get down to question 5 next 5 minutes. Just have a look through that, Johnny, and tell me that you understand what I'm asking you to do. And you wait for Johnny to tell you that he's understood, or if he doesn't understand, then you go through a few simple examples until he does understand, and you make sure that he tells you he can understand. And then you ask Johnny to tell you what you've just asked him to do. Johnny, what did I ask you to do? I've got to get down to question 5 in the next 5 minutes. Well done, Johnny, that's brilliant. I'm going to go around and help some other students, and then I'm going to come back here in 10 minutes just to make sure you've done that. Okay? Brilliant. I'm checking back and I'm getting him to tell me what I've asked him to do. That cuts out a lot of excuses. Next, concentrate on one step at a time. If you're working with really challenging students, particularly students I'm thinking of now with attention problems, ADHD, that kind of thing, they're going to need, in particular, those students are going to need your instructions broken down into very simple steps. It's no use saying to these students, right, turn to page 47 in the textbook, read the paragraph at the top, and then answer the questions 1, 4, and 5 in the blue box. Don't bother with question 2. It's too much, far too much. So start with one step at a time. Open the book, read that paragraph at the top of the page, and then let's talk about it one step at a time. I've been working with ADHD students in the past where even just to get them from the hall out onto the yard at break time, we've had to break it up into very clear stages. Get up from out your chair, stand behind your chair and push your chair under the table. When they can do that properly, they can then move on to the next step, which is to move from your chair to the door across the hall. And you'd be surprised just how long we had to practice those two instructions, getting from sitting at the table to putting their chair under the table and going to the door out to the yard. Took a long time to practice, but gradually we got each stage of the journey down to the yard and to get the football out practiced so that they could do it very quickly. If I said to them, okay, put your chairs under and go down to the yard for football, it's just chaos, it's bedlam, the ball flying everywhere and they're fighting and they're screaming and they're making silly noises. So we break it down into small, manageable chunks, and you can do that with work, you can do that with behaviour tasks as well. Concentrate on needs. We've talked a lot about attitude of the teacher, and this is where it really comes to the fore. When you're dealing with communication with the students, we've really got to be aware of those needs. Remember the hostile or the weak, permissive teacher. If we are too in their face, too hostile, we're compromising the needs for empowerment and belonging. And if we're being weak and permissive with them, that's not being the leader that students need in order to feel safe and feel that they've got a sense of belonging. So we've got to be the assertive, needs-focused teacher. Next, we want to move on from don't, if you can. It's difficult to do this one. But our brains don't register the word don't. Don't's a strange term that means absolutely nothing. Okay, so if you say to a student, don't run, their brain hears the word don't and doesn't register. The word that does register is run. Before you can think of what not to do, you've got to think of what you are doing first, or what you should be doing. So they carry on running invariably. So you concentrate on what you want them to do, which is walk slowly or walk sensibly, rather than don't run. And last but by no means least, there's a very clever way of getting your instructions followed, or having more chance of getting your instructions followed, and that is simply to give them a reason. This comes from research done by a research psychologist, Ellen Langer, and what she did was she set up a photocopier, and she had queues of people waiting to use the photocopy machine. And what she did, she came up to the queue and she asked with three different approaches. At first she just said, can I use the photocopier? And the queue of people let her in a fairly low percentage of time. I think she got in about 20% of the time she got into the front of the queue. Can I use the photocopier? Or can I use the photocopier, please? Then she tried a different approach, and she went up to the queue of people and she said, can I use the photocopier because my car broke down and I'm really late? And surprisingly, almost 90% of the people let her in front of the queue. She got in the front of the queue about 90% of the time by using a reason, by giving them a reason to have her instruction followed or a request followed. And what was really peculiar with this was, even when she gave them a reason which you would think had no effect whatsoever, it still gave the same result. So she went up to the queue and she said, excuse me, do you mind if I use the photocopy because I've got to make some copies, like we all have to make copies? Surprisingly, almost 90% of the time she got into the front of the queue again. So giving students a reason why they should follow instructions is a very, very clever strategy to use and very effective. So when you say to a student, come to my office at lunchtime, why not give them a reason for doing so? When you come to my office at lunchtime, make sure you get here early, because that way you're still going to get some of your break time. I'm actually making it much more appealing to them just by giving them a reason. Let's have work finished within the next 10 minutes so that we can do X. Give them a reason, there's more chance they will do it. Okay, that concludes giving instructions with more likelihood of students following them. Let's move on to the next topic. Thanks.